Hi, I'm A.K. Moss, and I am excited to be here today and start on the beginnings of a series called The Adventures of Red Roan, a novel I have written and have not released yet. And I just so enjoy this book and would like you guys to enjoy portions. So many people have asked about this book, and in the process of my life changes, this is one thing that I can offer you. And so, as this book proceeds to publishing, I hope you enjoy a sneak peek into the life and adventures of Red Roan. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are not but just one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Chief Seattle, 1854. For 11,000 years, the Nimipu, meaning we the people, were the dominant people of the Columbia Plateau. In the Pan Handle of northern Idaho, the Clearwater River flows from the base of the Bitterroot Mountains, where these nomadic people once lived and roamed on over 17 million acres. They hunted buffalo, fished, and farmed. When the explorers, Lewis and Clark, came around the land, mapping the area, the Nez Perce welcomed them, sharing their food and livelihood. But change approached the Nimipu people, strange cultures and people from other lands. They had no idea of how much their world was going to change in the following years. Through all of the chaos of change, challenges, and distant war, one thing remained: love. For love knows no boundary, color, or limits. So this story begins. Preface. People grow through experience if they meet life honestly and courageously. This is how character is built. Eleanor Roosevelt. Young Gabe Hart pulled up in front of the Mercantile in Mount Idaho in an old beat-up Model T Ford truck. Getting out from inside the cab, he said, "Need anything?" His mute friend, Dodge, on the passenger side, patted his shirt pocket with a grin and nodded. You got it, knowing that Dodge had a sweet tooth for butterscotch. That's peppermint, right? Dodge rolled his dark eyes, shook his head as he waggled his finger at him. All right, I got it. You don't need to get so lippy, Gabe smiled. Butterscotch it is. The things you got to do for a friend. Then turning to walk into the store. His black raven hair tucked behind his ears, a red bandana wrapped around his head, white long-sleeve shirt rolled up three-quarter sleeve, and a pouch of Bull Durham tobacco tucked in his shirt pocket along with top cigarette papers. With rolled-up cuffs on his Levi pants and black worn-out scuffed cowboy boots, Gabe strode into the Mercantile, his legs a little bowed, his back straight, and a lean frame. A pretty young woman behind the counter was watching him as he grabbed a loaf of bread and a quart of milk. Her long strawberry blonde hair cascaded across her shoulders in wavy curls. He turned to look at her. She averted her eyes to the counter and began rubbing briskly at an already clean spot. He set the last of his chosen items on the counter in front of her. Hi, he said. Her face went flush. Hello. Do you have everything today? I think this'll do. Her fingers shook as her face turned red. She tallied the items. She bumped the jar of milk that tumbled over and started rolling off the counter. Gabe reached out and caught it the same time she did. His dark, calloused hand met up with her pale white ones, their faces inches apart. Her eyes darted towards Gabe. Oh, shoot, sorry. She drew away. Shoo, that was a close one. Gabe straightened himself and put his hands back on his side of the counter. Seeing that she was still flushed, he attempted to change the subject. So, you new around here? No. She looked away, then started straightening the candy jars. She did not look at him again, so he softly stated the obvious. Nez Perce. I'm sorry, she said. I'm Nez Perce, if you were wondering. I don't bite, Gabe stammered. She straightened her shoulders and looked at him directly. Well, that is good to know. I don't know too many people that do bite. The young woman stopped fidgeting. Well, good to meet you, Mr. Nez Perce. No, Gabe was addled. Most people ask if I'm Indian, so I thought I would, trying to explain himself. Well, if they have to ask, apparently they're not paying attention. Gabe was surprised by her boldness all of a sudden and giving a half a laugh. I guess I would agree. She blushed as she continued. To answer your question, I've been here all my life. I graduated high school last year and thought I'd help Mr. Johnson here in the mercantile, so I come in once in a while. She finished up her tallying. He noted that she had an easy smile and deep blue eyes. He took in every detail from her high cheekbones, her fair skin, and even the small mole on her neck. $3.98, she told him for the final total. Gabe did not move. What? Did I do something wrong? She looked at the cashier tape. I made sure everything was here. He searched in vain for words to say, but everything sounded stupid in his head. You have the prettiest eyes I've ever seen. Or, I love the way you smile. What the heck? Just spit something out. There was an awkward silence, so she repeated, the total is $3.98. I double-checked it. Sure, I just didn't think the milk was that expensive, he stammered. I know, you might just have to buy a cow. It'd be cheaper, she smiled. With heart thumping, mouth dry, and breathing shallow, he realized the longer he stood there, the more awkward he got. Several bills fell to the floor as he fumbled through the money. He hastily picked them up and paid. He wasn't going to look at that girl again. Are you okay? Her voice was soft and concerned. I'm fine. And before he knew it, the words fell out. It isn't the milk, he stammered. You are the prettiest woman I have ever seen. Flushed, she gave him his change. His dark skin seemed to look dirty compared to her milky white hands. Gabe turned to leave before he made a bigger fool of himself when he saw Dodge drumming his fingers on the door in the truck. Dang! Exasperated, he turned back. I need a half pound of pepperoni. Butterscotch candy, too. Please? She smiled at him. So, which is it? We have both. Definitely butterscotch candy. She grabbed a small sack and weighed out the candy. He set the money on the counter, grabbed the bag, and headed out the door without a word. He was almost to the truck when he heard her soft voice call out, Sir, Mr. Nez Perce, sir, you forgot your groceries. He turned to see her lugging his bag of food and his jar of milk. Looking down at his small sack of candy, he shook his head. Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. Sheepish, he took the groceries and smiled. I don't mind. My pleasure. Gave me a chance to get outside. She hesitated and looked one more time in his brown eyes. Christine. My name is Christine McCleary. She boldly offered her hand to shake. He looked around to see if anyone would notice. It was one thing to talk to a white woman, but to touch her in public could turn into a totally different situation. After a pause and looking at her still outstretched hand, he reached out and took it softly and awkwardly shook. Gabe Hart. Nice to meet you, Mr. Hart, she stated as she continued to look at him. No one had ever called him Mr. before, just Gabe, and thanks again for the service. The help, he stammered. Just thanks again. Gabe turned and put the groceries in the truck bed, got in the cab, and closed the door. He glanced at her as he started the engine. See you later, he said as his foot slipped off the clutch and the truck lurched, hiccuped, and bucked before it died. Crap. Easy, Bertha, he said, turning the engine over again and starting it. He grinned at Christine. At this time, he let the clutch out smooth as it bounded over the curb and bounced into the street. He then ground the gears as he attempted to shift the bucking truck. He saw Dodge grinning, grabbing for the side of the door to brace himself. Don't you say a word, he said. Dodge let out a grunt of laughter and slapped his knee. You ain't getting any butterscotch, Gabe stated smartly as the wheel pulled from his hand as he hit a pothole and knocked the milk over in the back of the truck. Not one word, he said again. Dodge laughed even harder, slapping his leg again while taking another gulp of air, his eagle feather tethered to his cowboy hat flapping in the motion of the bucking truck. Gabe shook his head and began to laugh too, thinking the jar of whole milk would be whipped into butter if he kept driving that way. He looked into the rear-view mirror and saw Christine watching them. He couldn't help but smile. Chapter 1. Death changes everything. In the stillness of the ranch, Christine Hart stood in the open doorway, as she had done for the last 4 years. She was half expecting to see her husband, Gabe, working with one of the horses in the corral, only to find emptiness. Yet if she stared long enough, once in a while she could see an image of him in the dust swirls made by the wind. Everywhere she looked, he was there, waiting with another memory, another moment of life that was no longer. How could she pick up where he had left off? What was she supposed to do? How was she supposed to move on when everything around her was of them? He was dead. There was nothing to hold this young 23-year-old woman here except... She walked onto the back porch, the summer breeze blowing strands of her strawberry blonde hair into her face. A baby started to babble in the crib. She gathered him in her arms and kissed his chubby cheek. A motor car drove up. Her mother, Pearl McCleary, got out. A pert woman with a tight braid twisted into a bun on the back of her head, clothes ironed as stiff as her back. She invited herself to Christine's kitchen without pleasantries and tossed her handbag and white gloves on the table. Christine set her baby back in the crib and followed her mother like an obedient child. Pearl turned expectantly to her daughter. Christine, the fantasy is over. It is time for you to come home. You need to get back to civilization. Pearl said this without looking at her daughter, just stating a heartless fact. These are tough times, and you are not going to be able to work this ranch by yourself and raise that child. She paced around the kitchen, seemed anxious as she lifted a jar from the counter, wiping the imagined dust off the top of it. Move into town, and I will help you out. She pulled the jar back and slapped her hands together to remove the particles that might have been there. You can sell this property, Christine, and get back on track. She paused. And as for that boy, they have places for things like him. Christine looked at her mother, trying to absorb the words. They seemed empty as they echoed into her head. What do you mean? We're fine right here, Mother, feeling her voice begin to falter. Don't you give me that, Christine. You are not fine. You are alone and have no one to care for you. Christine began shaking, tears brimming in her eyes, but she could not let them fall. She just couldn't. A dull realization exploded from the pit of her stomach, while deep within, rage began to boil. I am not alone, and that thing is my son. The words burst out of her lips before she could even think. Surprised at her daughter's reaction, Pearl tried to reconcile. You know what I mean, honey. I only have your best interests in mind." It sounded like thick, waxing tar oozing from her mother's lips, stifling, smothering, as if Christine had no other choice. Christine felt the air leave her body, weakness in her knees as the words penetrated, helplessness into her heart. She felt her mother start stroking her hair, pulling it behind her shoulders, as she had done when Christine was a child. Her mother began braiding the strawberry strands. If only he didn't have such dark skin, and that black head of hair he has, he might just pass for one of us. But he looks Indian through and through. Christine could not breathe, yet her mother continued. "No man is going to want to marry you while you have that child. We can't work with that." Christine spun around, her hair falling free over her shoulders. She needed to create distance from this woman that had standards from a misguided society. "Well, maybe you don't have to work with that, Mother." "Don't you sass me, girl. You wouldn't be in this mess had you listened to me in the first place. There was absolutely no reason for you to marry that Indian. I didn't raise you and give you an education just so you could be an outcast in our town. Do you realize how much of a strain this has put on your father and me? God rest his soul. And all the excuses we had to make, and the stories we had to come up with? What does Indian have to do with it, Mom? I fell in love with a man who loved me. I never wanted for anything. Not one thing. And he has given me a beautiful baby boy. So tell me, what does Indian have to do with it?" "You just don't get it, Christine. Those savages have gotten into your head. Who's going to want you because of that child? Nobody." Her mother was almost screaming. "You will be the only white woman on the hill with a half-blood son. You are going to die penniless and alone in this world." Her eyes were brimming with tears. "Once I'm gone, no one will give a damn about you." Pearl grabbed her handbag and gloves and walked out. "Mark my words." Christine didn't stop her mother or try to justify. She silently watched a bitter, hateful woman leave her house. Walking out onto the porch, she watched the automobile kick up dirt and speed away. Lifting the baby from the cradle, Christine took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. "How is my Red Roan?" she whispered. He blew bubbles at her, his stubby little brown fingers grabbing the air. She stroked his pudgy round cheeks and lost herself in his hazel eyes, lifting him to the sky. "You are Red Roan Heart, the proud son of Gabriel Roan Heart, grandson of Chief Roan Tree of the Nez Perce tribe," she stated proudly, cradling him once again. "One day, my son, you are going to race the prairie wind. You'll be wild and free," she sang. "You'll race the prairie wind and be all that you can be. A whisper on the wind, Red Roan. You catch her if you can, for she will challenge you as you become a man." She forgot her pain in her heart and played with his pudgy fingers as she repeated it again. Christine noticed Dodge come out from behind the barn, his silvering hair floating in the wind as his golden eagle feather still wrapped and tied to the band on his hat. Christine walked towards the barn. She had an idea. She did not know a lot about the older man that stayed with the livestock. Her husband said that Dodge was like a brother, and Christine respected that. Since the tip of his tongue had been cut out as a teenager, he had stayed away from the people and town as much as possible. As for the last 4 years, she had respected his space, and with a casual nod and a short hello was all she had ever offered. She noticed a shallow bow of the head was all offered in return. Now approaching Dodge, Christine noticed he was like a wild horse shying away as she entered the barn. Thinking that he might run, she gasped, Dodge, please wait. I need to talk to you." She again stepped towards him. He backed to the wall inside the barn. Stopping right in front of him, looking from the child to the man before her, she held out the child in utter confidence that the silent man would accept the gesture. Dodge, this is Red Roan. He's ours now. Dodge cautiously held out his calloused hands as the small child blew bubbles at the stranger. Christine laid the child in his awkward arms. Within moments, Roan grabbed at the man's silvering hair. Half confident and with a sigh, she said, I have things I need to work out here. And for the first time since Gabe's death, she felt like she could speak. Maybe even breathe. She watched Roan play with the silent man in front of her. My mother wants me to give Roan to a reform school and move into town, Dodge. She saw him stiffen, look at the child in his arms and bring him closer to his chest, shaking his head cautiously. Christine noticed the tension, and then she finished her thought. She says I can sell this place and create a life for myself, but I feel that we have created a life with this child, and this child should be raised here. This is our life. She paused. My life, my child's life, and yours, Dodge. Dodge nodded, reached up and took the feather off of his hat and handed it to Red Roan. The child shrieked with delight. Christine smiled at the reaction. I can do this, Dodge. With a little help, I can do this. Do you want to stay here with me? Can I count on you for the help? Dodge nodded again. He pointed to the bridle on the wall and motioned to the colts awaiting outside the barn. All right. So you'll still work the colts for me? He nodded, pointing to the stall where he had been staying. He tapped himself on the chest lightly and pointed again to the bedroll, his eyes soft and confident. Christine looked at the 2 bales covered with a small, worn canvas and a wool Navajo blanket folded on it. Looking inside the stall, she noticed herbs on a rough-out cupboard, along with a few oils, authentic Nez Perce beaded breastplate of bone and a tomahawk, and a braided leather handle with meticulous beading work, and leather tassels off the end of it. Propped against the wall was a small photograph Christine had given to Dodge of Gabe as a boy, standing next to Roan Tree, and an older white man who had hired them to work the ranch. That man and Roan Tree was who adopted Dodge. They were standing just outside the house. There was so much Christine didn't know about him. The mute man's meager belongings and a few artifacts that would never have a story, and it all could fit on the back of a horse, yet she seemed to understand. Yes, I am honored for you to stay right where you are. He looked down at the child in his arms and began to hum a chant as if to seal it with recognition. It came out of his throat with unimaginable emotion. Christine felt a tear as she watched the last of the Hart family lay blowing bubbles and chewing on the leather tether. He looked at her for a moment and then handed the child to its mother, nodded, and left. Christine watched him walk out of the corrals and mingle with the horses. She didn't know what to say or if anything needed said. She was definitely not used to talking to a mute man, but there was a confidence and a sense of peace about him that made her feel that the right decision had been made. So she would not move to town. She would not send her child to any school. He belonged here with her and this place that Gabe and his father had made. She would sell the few colts that Gabe and Dodge had started. She had a few steers for butchering and milk and eggs, and Gabe had a couple of contracts to ride other horses for different ranches. So if Dodge would follow through with those and the money that they had set aside for more property, they ought to be good for a couple of years. She looked again at the lone picture against the wall that she had given to Dodge. Her eyes burning, she blinked several times before she walked away. Reassurance filled her. She was not helpless. She sure was not going to go to town and ask for help. She was strong, determined, and now that she had spoken with Dodge, a sigh of relief escaped her lips. She looked out onto the hill, under a lone tree where 3 crosses stood beneath it, one fresh mound still visible. Roan still had his new feather in his stubby little hand as she returned to the house. He was busy slapping it around and babbling. She would raise her child to be smart, strong, and courageous. He was going to need to be. She gave him a kiss on the forehead and put him back in the crib on the porch. It was a beautiful afternoon, and she walked into the house to start dinner. For who? She did not know. But she needed to do something. Things had changed at the Hart place. Memories would replace dreams for now, and hard work would grab the future. Next will be chapter 2. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you do, leave a comment down below and tell me what you think. I would so love to hear from you. And then next week we will read the second chapter and see where that leads us. So I hope you guys enjoy. You guys take care. God bless, and we'll talk to you soon. AK Moss out.